Okay, welcome. This is video one and day one of artist development. And so I'll just do a little introduction and then we'll talk about the series and what I'm aiming to do, and then get right into some drawing and some art. So for those who don't know me, I'm Andrew Loren. I'm an artist, semi-professional artist right now. I've been on Twitch streaming for about a year and a half now, and I have a small Discord community, Studio 35, which I'll leave links to these things in the video description. But I wanted to start a new series for the fall. I've been having a lot of trouble finding the time to do Twitch properly, so I think that YouTube and daily uploads might be a better way to kind of connect a little bit with the audience and also share a little bit more about my art and my process. So the idea here is that there's a lot of content, a lot of videos right now that talk about how to do certain things as an artist. Like, for example, if you want to learn um, how to draw the head from any angle, if you want to try and understand proportions better, if you want to try and understand anatomy better, there's a lot of videos out there. But what I wanted to do was talk a lot about like kind of practicing and art development, and kind of talk about my process. I'm mostly self-taught artist, but I did go to like an arts high school, so I have some background there. So for a couple of years, I took lots of art classes in addition to standard high school classes, and then I've also taken a few professional different courses at universities throughout my life, but generally self-taught, I would say. And I have a particular way of practicing or developing that I think is like a mentality that a lot of people might appreciate and might connect with. And so I thought that I could spend this series talking a little bit about how I do that and how I think about things. It's also a bit of a test, something kind of experimental. So we're kind of in this journey together. But I'm kind of at a point right now where I've been working on a lot of paintings recently, but I wanted to kind of spend this fall, the next 100 days, let's say 3 months, maybe a bit more, 3 to 5 months, developing some of my practical skills. So these are things like sharpening head drawing, sharpening proportions, sharpening accuracy, things to try and get a better kind of naturalistic look in my art, a more representational, a more realistic look. And so I'm going to go through a process that's kind of a little bit about it has elements of everything. It has elements of how I think about art generally, how I grow how I develop skills artistically, how I uh, develop skills technically, how you develop skills creatively. And it's kind of like a mentality or a mindset. And I think that I think it'll be interesting. My idea here, my goal is to do daily uploads throughout this period. And I think that that should be kind of interesting to show kind of this process and this development of my artistic process. And so the videos will get better. These monologues will get better as I get more and more used to doing this and just kind of like rambling and talking a little bit. But hopefully, either way, the valuable content will be there at the end, and you'll get some value out of this series. Excuse me. Okay, so the plan is that all the videos will be structured more or less the same. I'm going to do kind of like a brief little introduction before talking about whatever kind of my goal is for that day, or what I'm practicing, what I'm thinking about. Maybe some kind of like random topic that I'm thinking about artistically, or just generally about maybe like an art career or the art world. And then go into some kind of drawing, which I'll do a time lapse, which should have maybe some kind of music in the background, but it won't have me talking. One thing that I've kind of learned from Twitch, as much as I like it, is that it's not super. It's a bit difficult to like try and narrate what you're doing as you're doing it. It's. I don't think it's actually super helpful for my process as an artist. I think it's better to just do the drawing and then kind of come back to it a little bit later. So I'll put the time lapse of the drawing in the center of the video, and then at the end come back and kind of like revisit and talk about what I was thinking about when I was doing it, and maybe like a little bit of a critique, and then also set up whatever the next day will probably be. And so this will kind of be the structure of the video: some monologue, some art, and then revisiting the monologue. And I'm actually structuring these videos out of a YouTuber I've been watching, Sam Solik, who does kind of like workout videos. And he's also doing daily uploads, and he has kind of a very similar structure where he'll talk about his workout beforehand, he'll do the workout itself, and then kind of debrief afterwards. And I think it's like a really really nice structure for kind of like understanding the mentality of someone. So we'll kind of go through that approach. And the idea of this is not to replace streaming, so we'll hopefully do some live streams throughout this as well. but it's going to be this is something that I think I can handle much more consistently than live streaming, because those who don't know my lifestyle, I travel quite a bit. You'll see it in these videos because my backgrounds will be constantly changing. I'll never be pretty much in the same place, for more than a couple weeks at a time. So it's very difficult to set up a regular streaming schedule. But I'm not abandoning streaming. The idea here is not to replace, but more to supplement. Okay, cool. So I think that's enough about me, about the series. And so we can talk now a little bit about like what my goal is right now, what I'm kind of working on. So today the goal is to kind of look a little bit about process, meaning when I'm sitting down to actually draw something, what's the process or the steps that I'm going through. And I'm adapting right now something from Chris Legaspi, who is an incredible artist and has so many great instructional videos and so much great content related to learning art. I can't emphasize enough like how important he's been for my development as an artist, and I can't recommend him enough to go look at what he's doing. But the idea here is one of the processes that I've kind of observed him using, and I don't know if he's ever explicitly stated it in this way, but it's maybe implicitly in his artwork, is that he kind of uses a 6-step process with his drawings, which is it starts with a 2D construction of whatever he's drawing, which means kind of like, an outline, something that's kind of blocky, that kind of blocks things in. Then a 3D construction, meaning taking that shape and breaking it down into these 3D objects. So if you're looking at something like the face, like you think about the face as a box, or, the nose having a top plane here and then side plane kind of triangles. And then after that, you move into blocking in the shadow shapes. So then this is the first time you're really trying to capture light and understand like where anything that in shadow is in the drawing. And then step 4 is massing in the shadow shapes. And then step 5 is refining the edges. So generally after you're done with the mass in stage, you kind of have something that looks very blocky, very kind of graphic, almost like a comic book. And then the idea of refining the edges is kind of adding, if you have a sharp line, let's say like right now there's a bit of a shadow on my forehead. If you have a sharp line kind of denoting the edge of this, you soften this edge to kind of add more of a transition. And that's where you start to get into your halftones. So it's the things that are between the light and the dark. And then that's actually step 6, which is you finally put in the halftones. So you're not actually even thinking about them until you almost have a complete drawing. And I've been working on this process recently. I've probably done about 10 or 15 drawings just following these 6 steps. And I'm really enjoying this process and kind of like what it's doing in terms of kind of shaping the way the form is in the drawing and how the drawing is looking. So I'm going to do a drawing now where I'm focusing on this process. It'll be a portrait, and I'll kind of see if there's some way I can share the reference. But the idea here is that I'm not as concerned about a lot of different things with this drawing. Like I'm not concerned about accuracy so much. Like I need a likeness of the portrait. I'm not concerned about, getting all of the values perfectly. I'm not concerned about, things like the texture of the hair. I'm not concerned about anything really except process. Like that's all I'm focused on in this drawing. So when I'm sitting down to do this, it's really about emphasizing, okay, am I going through these 6 steps? 2D construction, 3D construction, block shadow shapes, mass shadow shapes, edges, and then halftones. And I'm trying to build up this kind of repetition of this process to try and understand it a bit better so that I can use it more effectively, and also that it kind of comes more naturally and just start to understand its advantages and its disadvantages. And so, when you're doing this kind of practice, the enlightened artist knows that you can't really judge the drawing itself. If I'm just working in my sketchbook, we're just going to do, super little image, super little drawing in the sketchbook. I'm not focused as much on the quality of this. Like, is this a nice piece that I would hang on the wall? It's not really my objective. Of course, I want to have a nice drawing. Who doesn't? But what I'm really trying to focus on, like what I'm really going to evaluate myself on at the end is, did I stick to the process and did I learn something about the process? And so that's kind of what I'll be focusing on. And when I'm doing the drawing, I'll actually even write down, you'll kind of see, I'll put down when I'm switching from one of these steps to another. And I've been doing that on all these drawings just to kind of like, help me keep track a little bit about where I am. And I'll even just kind of show one of these. So, here's a sorrow head. I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point. But you can see at the top, I think it's flipped right now. But anyway, I kind of wrote down each of these 6 steps as I was going through. And, here's another little drawing that I did which this is a copy of a drawing by Malcolm Niepce, one of my favorite artists. But I was kind of, going through the same process of understanding, okay, when am I moving from 2D construction to 3D construction, so on and so on, until I get finally to the halftones. Okay, so I think this is enough. Without further ado, let's jump into the drawing. Let's get into it. Okay, so drawing for day one done. Um, and the idea here is to do kind of like a little bit of a debrief, think about what I was, how the drawing went, and kind of like what my opinions are in that direction. So first thing overall, the drawing is not something that I like too much. Um, in terms of like there's some wobbly elements with respect to like things are not perfectly aligned. I think there's like a little bit of proportion issue, and just generally like not the most aesthetically pleasing drawing. But in theory, what I should be judging myself on right now only is about the process, because that's what I set out to practice. Was this kind of six-step process of 2D construction, 3D construction, blocking the shadows, matching the shadows, working on the edges, and then lastly doing the halftones. If my goal was to work on something like accuracy and proportion, and I fell short of that, then that would be the way I would evaluate it. But I wasn't really trying to get likeness or really try to get everything perfectly aligned. It's kind of like a secondary goal. So in terms of process, I actually think that the drawing went okay until the very edge, until the very end, until, for example, step 5 for edges. I think when I got to edges, I started to rework some of the like earlier construction, and even started to started to work in some halftones and jumping ahead a little bit. And this kind of caused some like value issues and some tonal issues within the drawing. I felt that I spent an adequate time on the 2D construction. The 3D construction, of course, is going to be one of the longer sections. And then, I accurately blocked in the shadows. I was kind of comfortable with how I did that. The reference is not, totally dark on one side of the face, but I made that decision to just kind of block in that entire side as shadow. And I like the decision. And I think like more or less stuck to the process up until edges. As I said in the beginning, like kind of the enlightened artist is judging themselves after a sketchbook session on what they sought to practice. And so on the process, generally okay, but fell apart a little bit at the end. Now I ended up doing some edits to the drawing, and I'll post a picture of that or an image of that. And I think in the end, like the drawing is actually okay. I added some kind of like graphic elements and kind of edited the design. And so, I'm kind of comfortable with that. But I think the next time that I do this, I need to be a little bit more deliberate and a little bit more conscious by the time I get to the edges and halftone stage. Because I think, yeah, there's a tendency, you just kind of get lost in you start editing edges, and then edges and halftones are, they're very related. And so I kind of got sucked into maybe jumping ahead on halftones before I should have. And so the next time I do the drawing, I'm going to do another process drawing again tomorrow. And I'll focus more on like really being deliberate about saving the halftones to the very end, and keeping each kind of element within its own process. And again, still not adding accuracy or thinking about accuracy or these kinds of things. But okay, so that's it. We're done with the first drawing, first day one. These are some reflections on, kind of how I'm developing or how I'm thinking about developing my artistic skills right now. And I guess tomorrow, day 2, we'll do more process.